Aranya Acharya Vrikshera Ekasaka Mukunda Kashinath Rudra Upashakaleka Aranya. Of the names Aranya, Acharya Vrikshera, of the tree of Acharyas, Eka, one, Shaka, branch, Mukunda, of the name Mukunda, Kashinath, of the name Kashinath, Rudra, of the name Rudra, Upashaka, Lekha, they are known as sub-branches. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Acharya Aranya was considered the 48th branch of the original tree. From him proceeded sub-branches known as Mukunda, Kashinath and Rudra. Please repeat. The Acharya Aranya was considered the 48th branch of the original tree. From him proceeded sub-branches known as Mukunda, Kashinath and Rudra. Purport. It is said that Aranya was the sannyas name of Srila Vishvarup, who was the elder brother of Vishvambara, the original name of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Aranya expired in 1432 Shakabda at Solapur, where there is a place of pilgrimage known as Pandarapura. This is referred to in the Adi-lila chapter 9 verses 299 and 300. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu opened a primary school in the house of Mukunda, or Mukunda Sanjaya, and Mukunda's son, whose name was Purushottam, became the Lord's student. Kashinath arranged the marriage of Lord Chaitanya in his previous ashram when his name was Vishvambara. He induced the court Pandit Sanatan to offer Vishvambara his daughter. In the Gaura Ganadeshti Pika, verse 50, it is mentioned that Kashinath was an incarnation of Satyajit, who arranged the marriage of Krishna and Satya. And it is mentioned in verse 135 that Rudra, or Sri Rudra Ram Pandit, was formerly a friend of Lord Krishna named Varutapa. Sri Rudra Ram Pandit constructed a big temple at Vallabhapura, which is 1 mile north of Mahesh, for the deities named Radha Vallabha. The descendants of his brother Yadunandan Bodhya Padhyaya are known as Chakravarti Thakurs, and they are in charge of the maintenance of this temple as Sevites. Formerly, the Jagannath deity used to come to the temple of Radha Vallabha from Mahesh during the Ratha Yatra festival, but in the Bengali year of 1262, due to a misunderstanding between the priests of the two temples, the Jagannath deity stopped coming. Omagana Timirandasya Ginanjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmanitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurve Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhaite Garinyat Kripatamaham Vande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master has very kindly come, forced open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my most respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. By the grace of the spiritual master, the saviour of all fallen souls, even a lame man can cross over mountains, a blind man can see stars in the sky, and a dumb man can recite eloquent Vedic poetry. So, Vishvarup is the elder brother of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And in the family, Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Devi lost a number of daughters at birth, and then Vishvarup came into their family, so they were naturally overjoyed. And he was a very serious personality. He's described as an expansion of Lord Sankarshan in the Chaturvyuha. Vasudev, Sankarshan, Aniruddha and Pradyumna. So he is ultimately an expansion of Lord Baladev. So not an ordinary jiva. And for those of you who like a little technical information, we can go a little bit deeper than that. He's actually described as an incarnation of Sankarshan. He, Vishvarup, is both the ingredient and immediate cause of the creation of the material world. He is non-different from Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. For the Amsa and the Amsi, or the part and the whole, are not different. And there is, of course, he grew around the age of 16 or 18 years of age. His father, Jagannath Mishra, noticed how handsome his son was, and at that time he and his wife, Sachi Devi, started making arrangements for Vishvarup's marriage. And Vishvarup heard of this, and not wanting to get married, he left home. And within a few days, he accepted the renounced order of life, sannyas, and this is his sannyas name, Shankar Aranya Swami. And he left home, and he travelled to many holy places throughout the length and breadth of India, and he also, as travelling renunciants do, he also lived in forests, just as Mahaprabhu also. On his travels, sometimes would spend time in the forests. Forest of Jarikanda especially is mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, whilst travelling hither and thither. And Mahaprabhu used the pretext, if you like, of searching out his older brother Vishvarup as an excuse to travel to South India, where he thought, of course, he's the omniscient Supreme Lord. He already knew that his older brother had actually passed away, but he very much wanted to inundate the southern provinces of India and also the western side with his Sankirtan movement. So he used that as an excuse. Let me go alone to search out my brother, Vishvarup. So, of course, Mahaprabhu did that, and in the course of his travelling on the western side at Pandharapura, he did learn from one exalted saintly person, Sri Rangapuri, informed Lord Chaitanya that in fact his older brother had passed away there in that particular holy place. And it's said that Vishvarup actually entered into the deity, a very famous deity of Krishna in Pandharapur, Lord Vital, or Vital Ishwara. In the mysterious ways that it works, he also, sometime thereafter, it's said that he entered into the body of Lord Nityananda. So we can see that Lord Chaitanya's elder brother was present for many of the Lord's pastimes as family member. And it's not clear exactly how many years, but it doesn't appear there was too many years between the two brothers. So Vishvarup was present for all of the Lord's early Navadvip childhood and perhaps early youth pastimes before leaving home and becoming a sannyasi. And Caitanya Mahaprabhu, as Nimai Pandit, assured his parents that it was actually very glorious what his older brother, their eldest son, had done in taking sannyas. That would bring inestimable glory to the family. And we came across one quote from the Vedas that if one does take the renounced order of life, sannyas, he liberates many generations. When a person accepts sannyas, 60 million of his family members go to live in Vaikuntha. Haribol! 60 million family members. That's preceding and in the future. So, of course, it's not a cheap thing, and I think one of our devotees was revealing recently in ISKCON, I think even now we only have a little more than 100 or so sannyasis. So it's a very, not an ashram, except for those very exalted, very spiritually powerful personalities, and even then generally recommended in old age. Or at least from middle age, from 50, 60, 70 onwards. There's an interesting story. We may be knowing that when Srila Prabhupada accepted sannyas, and he actually accepted the order of renounced life in 1959, exactly 450 years after Vishvarup's acceptance of sannyas. And that occasion is known as Vishvarup Mahotsava. And it's sometimes said that that was the day that Vishvarup accepted sannyas, and some say it was the day that he left this world. And some say it was both, except on different years, on that particular day. Or both pastimes on the same day, different years. So when Prabhupada accepted the renounced order of life from his godbrother, Bhakti Prajan Keshav Maharaj, on Vishvarup Mahotsava, there was one other godbrother who also accepted sannyas. His name is Muni Maharaj. And Muni Maharaj was quite a lot older. He was in his 90s. And Prabhupada told this story one time, that he asked, as is the etiquette and the consideration, a man is not allowed to take sannyas unless he gets his wife's blessings, permission. You don't impress Krishna by being irresponsible. So, that is, of course, if one still has a wife who's living in this world. Of course, Naishtika brahmacharis who've never married, no problem. Or perhaps husband and wife have already separated for a long period of time. Anyway, Muni Maharaj was in his 90s, and he was still with his family. So he asked his wife and children, who were also quite old, for their blessings. And they said, sure, no problem. Take sannyas. Because he was already in his 90s, and who knows how many more days, weeks, months or years one has living when you are in your 90s. So they gave him their blessings, and he also was there, and the famous photograph was taken on the occasion of Prabhupada and Muni Maharaj, one on either side of Bhakti Prajan Keshav Maharaj. So, and that was on that occasion, Vishvarup Mahotsava. Maha Utsav, great festival. So, so that's a little bit. There's some other interesting points. Let's just make sure we don't overlook any important information here about Vishvarup, also known as Shankar Aranya. All right, I think we've covered most of it. This is all, of course, described in Caitanya Caritamrita. Well, there's one very important pastime which perhaps we can discuss now. And regarding Vishvarup, earlier life, and that is that Vishvarup would go regularly. He was very attached to studying Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and he would go regularly to the home of Advaita Acharya to hear these principal literatures of the Vaishnavas, hearing classes from Advaita Acharya. And he actually didn't spend much time in his own house, because he was always at Advaita Acharya's home discussing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And when Sachimata heard that her son had very suddenly left home and taken the renounced order of life, she was naturally very upset. And Prabhupada does comment in a number of places, it's natural to have affection for one's family members. So, a little bit later on in the lives, when Mahaprabhu revealed his divinity and started his Sankirtan movement, of course the nocturnal kirtans were going on at Srivas Angam. And at one point there, Srivas asked Mahaprabhu, you are distributing love for Krishna prema to everyone. What about your mother, Sachi Devi? And Mahaprabhu said that his mother was not entitled to receive Krishna prema because she had offended Advaita Acharya. So the offence was that Mother Sachi considered that it was Advaita Acharya's fault that her son had left home and become a renunciant. So she held a very critical attitude to Advaita Acharya for that reason. And Lord Caitanya demanded that his mother actually go and offer obeisances and beg forgiveness from Advaita Acharya, which is exactly what Mother Sachi did. And then she got Krishna prema. So, and of course that's a very instructive pastime for all of us, not to offend our fellow devotees, because otherwise we'll be denied love of Godhead, because Mahaprabhu does not tolerate offences to his devotees. So it's a very, and in fact Mother Sachi was referring to Advaita Acharya as Dvaita, which can be translated a number of ways, and one of those is duplicity rather than monist or Advaita, which Dvaita means you dual. So in that way she was maintaining a very critical outlook. But that was rectified, and Mother Sachi also was infused with Krishna prema by her son's mercy. So I heard something not so long ago, which some of you may have also heard. Not sure who said it, but it's worth repeating. If Krishna likes you, he'll give you everything. But if Krishna loves you, he'll take everything away from you. Now that can be a little confronting, right? Some of us don't have much, but what we do have, we might be very attached to. So be meditating on that a little bit. He'll give you everything. If he loves you, he'll take everything away from you. And of course, profound examples of that are Srila Prabhupada, and also the Pandavas and their mother Kunti and Draupadi. In Srila Prabhupada's case, an astrologer did predict that Prabhupada would become one of the richest men in India. And riches can be defined in various ways. Yes, there's big bank balance, millionaire and billionaire, owning gorgeous properties in beautiful parts of the world, a floating palace in the form of a mega yacht in the Mediterranean, and so on and so forth. Yes, that's certainly one type of riches, but there are other riches as well. And for Brahminical persons and Vaishnavas, when Krishna says, I take everything away, it's not as though he leaves us absolutely poverty-stricken, penniless, destitute. Not at all. He gives us actually the priceless thing which Mahaprabhu gave his mother, and that is love for Krishna. The inconceivable highest happiness that the jiva can possibly relish. So, and we see in Prabhupada's life that Prabhupada has become so rich in other opulences. Of course, his institution continues to grow steadily, despite pandemics and now wars in Europe and so on. Prabhupada is becoming so famous, and so that's an opulence, most certainly. And his institution, of course, is very large. He's famous as a great author. So in this way, even the one opulence of fame, of course, Krishna has these opulences, and he's always trying to see his devotees glorified. Actually, there's a wonderful pastime in Mahabharata and also in Bhagavatam, and that's Yudhisthira Maharaj desiring to perform the Rajasuya Yajna. And one reason, amongst a number, that Yudhisthira Maharaj wanted to perform the Rajasuya Yajna, and he told Krishna and other family members, was, Krishna, I want the world to see what can be achieved by your devotees. So we see that what was achieved by Srila Prabhupada in his lifetime, not without enormous struggle. Just as the Pandavas, Yudhisthira Maharaj became the emperor of the whole world, not without great struggle and not without times where they were living in the forests, deprived of everything which was rightfully theirs. So everyone is looking for shelter in this material world, and Ashraya is the 10th topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Samambonam. And all the other 9 topics. In order for a Purana to be a Purana, it must have at least 5 topics. And one, and often 2 of those topics are the creation, because people are really interested in how all this came about. But Srimad Bhagavatam has 10 topics. For that reason it's known as the Maha Bhagavat Purana. And the 10th topic is Ashraya, or shelter, ultimate shelter. So Kunti Devi has prayed wonderful prayers in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and one of them we can remember the first line and the last line, but 2 lines out of 4 we'll take that, in the sense that Janma Aishvaya Shruta Sribi, and then Edamana, excuse me, we can remember a little bit more, but Tvam Akinchana Gochara. So Kunti Devi's praying to Krishna that those who are trying to improve their material situation, Krishna, through Janma, good birth, Aishvaya, wealth, Janma, Aishvaya, Shruta, high education, and Sri, bodily beauty, such persons cannot approach you with sincere feeling. But you, Krishna, are the property of those who are materially impoverished. But and our acharyas describe that important to note is that what one must be free of is the pride in one's good birth, if one did get a good birth, pride in one's wealth, high education, or bodily beauty. One may be blessed with those things, but one shouldn't be proud of them, should know that they're coming and they're going. Such is the nature of this world. Opulences come and go. So Kunti Devi is praying like that. And even more mysterious is her prayer, where she prays to Krishna for the calamities to come again and again. I just need the first word. Can anyone know the first word of that sloka? If you can look it up. Yeah, Krishna Kirtan. Vipada Shantuta Shasvat Tatra Tatra Jagat Guru Bhavato Darshanam Nashat Apuna Bhavadarshanam. Let the calamities come again and again, for by them coming we will see you again and again, and by seeing you we no longer see repeated birth and death. So Kunti Devi had a lot to be proud of. She was a very aristocratic lady. She was the mother of the emperor of the whole world. Actually, and Kunti Devi is a very exalted devotee of Krishna in Vatsalya Rasa. She's not the most exalted. There is a hierarchy, and that is described that foremost is Jasoda Mata, followed by her husband Nanda Maharaj, and then, pretty close to this sequence, but then you have Mother Devaki and Vasudeva, and then Mother Rohini, the mother of Lord Balaram, and then the other wives of Vasudeva. And then is the wife of Sandipani Muni, Krishna's teacher. And then I think is Krishna's aunt, Kunti Devi. So she is a very exalted personality, and she's praying to Krishna rather than enjoying all the opulence of the kingdom after the great battle of Kurukshetra. She's actually, because at that point Krishna was leaving Hastinapur after spending, of course, the great battle for 18 days, and then there were weeks and months afterwards where everything was just the coronation, and of course there were funerals to be held for all the great heroes who had perished. And it's said that just as Arjuna had his, you could say, crisis before the battle, not wanting to fight and giving very good reasons to Krishna why he shouldn't, well, after the great battle, then Yudhisthira Maharaj had his crisis, where he felt it was his fault for so many great heroes had perished, and so many ladies were left widows, so many children had lost their fathers. So Yudhisthira Maharaj basically refused to sit on the throne for some months afterwards. So anyway, after all those momentous events, eventually he did, and the world was being ruled by a great devotee of the Lord, being assisted by his brothers. So at that point Krishna left for his own capital, Dwarka, and those prayers of Kunti Devi are offered at that time, very touching, very moving prayers. And she's praying to Krishna that we prefer, because you always used to come, Krishna, and protect us. When Draupadi, the attempt was made by Dushasana and Duryodhana and Karna to disrobe Draupadi in the assembly hall, and nobody protested, even grandfather Bhishmadev, what to speak of other elders, when they lost their entire kingdom and even lost Draupadi in the gambling match. Attempts were made on Kunti Devi's sons, the house of Shalak, the poisoned cake, and so many, because Duryodhana was so jealous. Prabhupada gives the definition, a very concise definition of envy: the inability to tolerate another person's good fortune, quote unquote. So Duryodhana just could not tolerate that his cousin brothers, the Pandavas, were the rightful heirs to the kingdom, and he tried by fair means and foul to eliminate them. And of course this was causing great distress to their mother, Kunti Devi. But still Kunti said, we prefer that. We prefer those situations, because repeatedly, Krishna, you would come and save us, and we get to see you. And in that way, we would not have to see again repeated birth and death. So there are instant reactions to major world events, and then there are reactions to major world events which are more subtle and take a period of time to manifest. So just like a survey was done a few years ago in America, where people were asked, what do you think of when you hear the name India? And many people replied, we think of colourful festivals with chariots and people dancing, Rath Yatra. Because in America and all over the world, Prabhupada initiated the holding of Lord Jagannath's Rath Yatra festivals, and that's colourful festivals and people dancing. So that's a nice result which has taken, you could say, 50 years. I think the first Rath Yatra was held in San Francisco in 1967. Our very own Mukunda Maharaj was instrumental in organising that festival, and so that's taken some time to manifest, but that for many people was what they think of. If they've never been to India, they've seen the cultural conquest which is Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement. So a more instant effect, of course, is what we're experiencing now with the war in Europe, that we're having to pay more for our gasoline, any food, because everything pretty much in this world requires transportation. If we want to fly anywhere, the airfares are getting more expensive. So Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement begun more than 500 years ago in India is having very profound effects. They may not be immediately perceivable. They're more subtle. They're actually the most subtle. We have very gross things in this realm, and we have very subtle things. And the most subtle, of course, is the spirit soul and spiritual culture. So, I've got a few more points here. Krishna, just trying to... Perhaps we can tell... this ties in a little bit. We all know the great heroism, enormous struggles that Prabhupada and the devotees who were in Bombay in the early 70s underwent to see the vision that Prabhupada had for that very important, wealthiest city in India, the establishment of Hare Krishna land, Radha Rasa Bihari's beautiful, magnificent temple and cultural centre. So interestingly, Prabhupada spent a lot of time in Bombay. He had to. And during that time, he met many of the most prominent, wealthy and influential families of Bombay. They were attracted to him. He was very pious. But many of them had already taken initiation from some of the most famous Mayavadi sannyasis of the time. But Prabhupada would just encourage them, and he would also engage them in service. Many would give substantial donations, and many who were influential were instrumental in breaking down the barriers which existed there in the form of corrupt police and corrupt municipal officers who were blocking Prabhupada's applications to build the temple. Because these people were very influential and prominent members of society, they were able to, they had influence. And Prabhupada engaged them in service, and ultimately everything turned out despite a great fight, which Prabhupada said was a good fight and somebody should write a book about it. And that has come to pass. But Prabhupada was very careful in how he dealt with those persons and engaged them in service. And what wonderful service they did, to the point where some of our devotees who are in recent years, even decades, knew these people and knew them very well. Some of the original Bombay devotees, when they heard that these people were passing away, they would go and see them. And a number of them would reveal on their deathbeds how much they loved Prabhupada and how grateful they were for Prabhupada's association, even though they had taken initiation and perhaps right up until the end of their lives remain Jnana Mishra Bhaktas at best. Their devotion to Krishna tinged to one degree or another by Mayavad philosophy. Still, at the end of their lives, they were thinking of Prabhupada and relishing their good fortune in having met him and being engaged by him in such a colossal and wonderful success. So Krishna's in the heart. He always sees the good that his devotees and aspiring devotees are trying to do. So at the time of their leaving this world, that is all wonderfully taken into account. So I might stop here, everyone. Thank you. Any questions, comments, or corrections? Krishna Kirtan Prabhu. Does somebody want to pass the microphone? Thank you, Ram.
Just in relation to Vishwarupas, you mentioned that you entered the body in Prabhu. The other spiritual rumour around Ekachakra, there was a mysterious sannyasi that came who did die away. And someone said that was also Vishwarupa.
Okay. I have not.
Makes a lot of sense, but you haven't heard that.
I haven't heard that.
I've heard that many times over the years.
Okay. All right.
I have some evidence for it.
I've never heard that, so thank you. If that's yeah, I can't comment, having not. Yes, there are so many mysteries. This whole Krishna consciousness is very mysterious. But I've not heard that, Prabhu. So I mean, there are other. I have read that some say that. That personality was Lakshmipati Tirtha, who was the initiating spiritual master of Lord Nityananda. That's a little interesting in the sense that Lakshmipati Tirtha was 2 generations ahead of Mahaprabhu, in the sense that he was the initiating spiritual master of Madhavendra Puri, who initiated Ishwara Puri, who initiated Lord Caitanya. So there was some difference in age between Nityananda Prabhu and Lord Caitanya. Some say 8, 12 years, like that. But that's quite a gulf. But that's all I've ever read regarding the mysterious sannyasi who came to Ekachakra. Thank you. Anything else, Ram Prachad?
When you were talking about Krishna, when you talk about Krishna taking everything away, if he really likes, I remember Prabhupada commenting, he said, I'm not the loser. He said, Krishna has given me so much. He said, I had 3, 4 children? 5 children. He says, now I have thousands of sons and daughters.
Thanks for reminding of that, Ram. Yeah, it's probably one of the most emotional, very, very moving. That was on the occasion of Prabhupada receiving news from India that his sannyas guru, Bhakti Prajan Keshav Maharaj, had passed away. So Prabhupada wrote a condolences letter, and he was either in Portland or Seattle, and I always get those two mixed up. But in one of those important, and it was late 60s, it was early days in the movement, and yes, as you say, Prabhupada becomes very emotional. He's actually crying. He said, this God brother, as you well know, he forced me. Yeah. Prabhupada was having those dreams where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was appearing in dreams, urging him to leave home and preach, and Prabhupada referred to those dreams as horrible. And he confided in different God brothers, sannyasi God brothers, should he take sannyas, and others said, well, let's wait a while and separate a little bit from your family first of all, which Prabhupada did. He lived in Vrindavan for possibly, at least 8 or 9 years as a Vanaprastha before accepting the renounced order. But then Bhakti Prajan Keshav Maharaj, Prabhupada was getting older, and he realized if he was going to go to the Western world, he'd have to do it soon, because he was, by that time, at least in his late 50s, if not early 60s, and Bhakti Prajan Keshav Maharaj really encouraged Prabhupada, yes, you must do it. One cannot be a preacher to the scale that you are envisaging and that our Guru Maharaj wants without being a sannyasi. So, yeah, and Prabhupada said, yeah, but I'm not the loser. And Prabhupada even one time, said his spiritual sons and daughters, he was extremely grateful, saying that all of his disciples had been sent by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to help him in his mission of spreading Krishna consciousness. So thank you for that comment. Anything else, Prabhu?
Prabhu, you mentioned about first expansion of Krishna, Sankarsana, and that's how the Vishwambara came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's elder brother. At the same time, Nityananda Prabhu, who is himself is a Balaram. So how does that, Balaram is also like the first expansion of Krishna. How does that two personality incarnate at the same time to participate in Adi-lila?
Yes, Krishna is not limited. He's unlimited. He can expand unlimitedly, and he does. And yes, he can enter into different personalities. Yeah, he's not. You and I, we're stuck within this one body, but the Supreme Person, he can appear. He can expand himself unlimitedly, just like one candle lights many other candles and they all burn equally brightly, but there still is one original candle. So there are many functions to perform in the creation and the maintenance and the destruction of the universes. So Krishna expands first as Lord Baladev, and then Baladev continues to expand unlimitedly as well. Just as Lord Balaram expands, he is Supreme Personality of Servitor Godhead. So even though he's older brother, and same for Lakshman and Nityananda Prabhu, Lord Balaram expands as Krishna's flute, as the Lord's bed, clothing, shoes, holy dham, and just a few, unlimitedly. As Seshanaga, Krishna's lying down on older brother, and Krishna Kirtana was you were explaining that temperance is always perfect, never too hot, never too cold. So yes, Krishna is unlimited, and he has his different shaktis, energies, Lila Shakti, and so many other energies are there simply by his willing. Just by thinking, Krishna can expand, and does in unlimited ways. So that's just something. Is that all right? Okay. Jai Ho. Jai Shri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.